been a while, but I'm finally getting back to finishing up the that guest bathroom that I had some videos about. So, in the end of the last video, you saw I had started picking out some stock to make my moldings for around the baseboard. So I basically, it's all rough cherry from my backyard, and I just started out by kind of ripping it down to the approximate width that I needed, and then flattening one side of it. And now it's time to go back and plane the other side so it's parallel and the proper thickness that I need for the moldings. So it's all pretty much the same thing. You always prepare the stock, you flatten one side and join another, and then plane the other side. Now I'm going back and just ripping the last side parallel with the table saw to right down to my size. And in order for the moldings to come out right, you have to make sure that you do them pretty much all at once and get them the right size. Now, I showed you quite a ways back I had bought this molding cutter set for my router table from MLCS, and my wife didn't know which molding she wanted, but once we saw the set, we picked out a bit here that we were both happy with. So it's time to set up the router table and start cutting some moldings. So it's real easy with all the push buttons and the motors and stuff on it. And I have run into a one issue that I'll show you later, but when I put it in position and I turn off the motors, when I wired it, I actually disabled the motors, where I have to go back and change some wiring to keep them locked so they don't move. But it's really easy to change a bit, as you can see here, and this is quite a large bit. You can see that I'm going to be cutting with. My first time making moldings on this table, so it's a new experience for me. In the past, I had a Foley bell saw planer molder that I used, and that was really easy because you just kind of cut the stock and you fed it through, and it really did everything automatically. And this is a whole different process. So I got the cutter bit mounted in the router table there, and there's my stock that I'm using, and I just kind of have to get the elevation set exactly where I want it. And then it's just a matter of bringing the fence in so that that bearing on top is exactly in line with the fence itself. So there, I want to make sure that you're just barely touching the bearing. One thing I found out when you do moldings this way is you really have to hold everything flat up against the fence on the input side, because the output side, once you machine it away, it will rock. It's not like cutting them on a planer where you're pushing against a flat table. So everything's pretty much set up there and ready to go, and just kind of run the first test piece. And I selected a short piece to do here, and that Milwaukee router, actually it's a big bit that's doing a lot of cutting, and dust collection and everything on the table is working good, so I don't have a mess. But one thing I did find out, when you're hand feeding like this, wherever you pause or stop, you will have a mark in the face of the molding when you're done. So that's one thing that I really don't like about this process. But the bit did cut really nice. It did do it all in one pass. There's no way you can do two passes on a setup like this. And you can see, it did do a really nice smooth job, except for where I paused in the feeding. It needs to be sanded out. So then I went back and I decided to add one more little spring pressure thing on that top edge to keep the molding from up against the fence tight there from flipping. And it's time to go back through and just start running all the pieces now. And you do have to push pretty good because you are taking a big cut. And there you can see how the molding's basically floating in air on the outfeed side there, except for that one edge on the top there. So you have to be careful that you don't put any pressure on the bottom corner of that on the output side. And I did do this first one, and then I went back and started feeding another one, and I realized that the fence had shifted back a little bit, and that was the problem, what I had told you about, where I left the steppers unlocked, and there's the marks you get when you actually pause. But it does come out nice. But I left it so the steppers were unlocked when after I adjusted to position. And it turns out that the lead screws don't have enough friction in them to stop it from shifting with all the vibration on a cutter this big. So I'm going to be doing some rewiring to keep them locked in position, and I don't care if they get a little bit warm, but that'll solve my problems. So I started here the second one. There you can see everywhere where there's a little bit of pause and feed, you do get a slight mark. So this definitely is not the best way to make a lot of moldings if you're gonna be doing multiples. Luckily, I don't know what I did, maybe about 40 feet of them. And there you can see I wound up adding some clamps and stops once I realized that had moved a hair. But I'll fix that by locking the motors later. And then I was able to run all the rest of the parts, and everything nothing moved anymore, and everything stayed perfect. So, and it's nice having those little extra supports on the fence there to help with feeding the longer pieces. And it's just kind of I definitely won't do this again without a power feeder, so I'm going to have to decide how to build the power feeder for this next. That really didn't take long once it was set up and running properly, and that Milwaukee router really does have a tremendous amount of power, and that works really good for cuts like this and stuff. So I'm real happy with that. And in the end, the dust collection, everything on it did work really good. And let's see here, you can even see underneath there was basically clear of dust once everything was done. So it seems to be working good and doing a good job. I had no dust in the air, and all the moldings did come out pretty good, and like I said, there are marks wherever I did pause in the feeding of them, so they all have to be sanded out now. But basically, I'm happy with the cut quality of the bit and everything else, and I was surprised how nice it did cut them. But then, and here's the dust I made with them, and I just wanted to show you how bad this grizzly growler is. It caught some of that coarse stuff, but this is what I found in the filter after I was done cutting them. So that's definitely going to be the next thing to go. It's basically worthless piece of garbage, so I'll be replacing that in a video soon. So then it was back to sanding them all, and by the time I got done, I had another over 6 hours invested in getting all those little bumps sanded out, but about 1 inch on each end of them I could not sand out. There was damage from the cutter end or anything and stuff, so that had to be trimmed off on all of them. Then I went back once they were all sanded down, and I decided to put a big back relief cut in them because the wall is really far from perfect that these have to go up against. And the previous moldings had a large back relief in them to clear all the the bad taping job, and so I just ran a dado on the back, and you can see I cut a lot out there just so I wouldn't have problems keeping them flat against the wall. And basically they're all there and ready to start finishing. Real happy they did. They did sand out nice and stuff, and it's just a matter of just cleaning up a little bit on the backside there where I had cut that out. And then I went back and I took each of these moldings and I put 3 coats of polyacrylic on each side of them and sanded between the coats just so you'd have good adhesion for the next coat. That took about the longest of anything, getting them all coated and ready to go. And then in the meantime, I also started working on some woodwork to hide the edge of that fiberglass shower enclosure because of the color difference, and we didn't like how it looked there. So what I did is I started making some moldings and trims to match a trim around the mirror, but it's amazing when I look at this one wall here and I went to put a straight piece of trim up against it. It's off by half an inch in the middle. It's bowed out. I couldn't believe that. This house was supposed to be built by one of the best builders in the area, and there's so many little things that they screwed up. The other side wasn't too bad, though I didn't have much scribing to do on that, but I was able to plane it down and get everything pretty much tight fitting, and so there's what the surround is going to be around the front there. Meantime, I'm still harvesting some of that lettuce I've got growing under the lights because the stuff outside is really not doing that good yet. So we've been enjoying that. And same thing with these trim for around the shower there. It had to be 3 coats of polyurethane on each side with a sanding between them. And now I'm going to start doing some of the installing on them. And I decided to actually use a silicone adhesive to hold these in place and make sure that everything was sealed good, so moisture couldn't get behind it in the future and do any damage. So I started by installing the that bottom piece there with the adhesive, and here you can see out the window that day it's snowing again. It's like every 3 days we get a snowstorm lately. It's just crazy. I can't get out in the garden and get going. But I got the bottom piece on first, and now I'm, same thing. I'm using the silicone adhesive to attach it to the front of the stall and also seal it to the glass door assembly there. So I'm just going to make sure everything's sealed good and just putting that in place, and I'm going to put some wedges in just to hold everything and lock it in tight while the adhesive sets up a little bit there before I go on to anything else. And that's all held in place there now, and let that sit a couple hours, and I went back and took those wedges out and decided to do the same thing on the other side. Applied silicone to everything and pressed it in place, and back to the wedges and get everything tight. Just let the adhesive dry a little bit. Then there's a cap that goes across the top there. And this actually goes in place and has some screws that lock down into the top of those side pieces. And then there's a once that's all screwed in place, there's a another cap that goes on top. You can see the radius that matches the radius on the sink, and that just has a couple screws on the back to hold it in place. So that kind of finishes off the shower there, so that you really don't see that fiberglass edge on the front until you open the door. And then once all that's all set up, I went back and made sure everything was really caulked and sealed perfectly, so there was no way for any moisture to get behind it later. Then it's time to start cutting all the moldings to length. I've got them all, 3 coats of the polyacrylic on them, and it's down to this Evolution miter saw, and I cut everything with this saw, and actually it does did a better job than the old DeWalt that I used to have did. I did buy the wood blade for it, put that on there, and the angles are accurate and they lock in place good, and it's really easy to swap it around and stuff, and I will say it did do a good job on all these moldings for me. So that's the boring part. It does take a while to get everything marked and cut, and just the different angles back and forth on each end have to be properly made, and I've got some little short pieces that go in around the doors and stuff like that, so took me a while to get everything sized properly, but luckily I made no mistakes, and everything everything fit perfect. So I will say that this this saw did do a really nice job on the fitting of the molding, so I'm real happy with it. You see, it did a perfect 45 cuts and everything. And then a couple areas by the door, I actually had to go back so you didn't have end grain visible, and fill in glue pieces on the end, and then I just took a utility knife and carved them out, and then put a couple coats of polyurethane on it after it was done. And a couple more cuts, and I'll have all the moldings ready to install. Kind of hard to see though when you're cutting on that side of the saw with the motor body in the way there, so you have to kind of look around the edge there and try to get everything lined up. So I should have probably turned the laser on, but I didn't. I didn't feel it's accurate enough for these long cuts. But in the meantime, my wife's finishing up. There's the last butternut from her garden, the last potatoes from her garden, and some shallots that she's roasted up. And you can see we got another snowstorm. There's a couple days later, another inch of snow today. So it just won't stop. It's crazy this year. And the wood stove's been cranked up every morning so far. Still hasn't had a break. So kind of crazy weather that we're having. And then I ran into a problem. So many boots left over. You know, my wife and I each have about 4 pair of boots for different reasons in the winter. And I had some extra space over the stairway, so I just decided to put a little shelf up there. It's 16 feet in the air, and I need a ladder to get them, but it's a good place to store them off season. And then I needed some more wood. I brought in some more cherry, and you can see I've actually redone all my dust collection lines in my shop and started moving machinery around also. I got that thickness sander in the center, and those dust lines all moved and stuff to get ready for a different setup. And, now same thing over to the store. These are some pieces for the mirror frame that I'll be making next. And also, I've got one piece for the top of the door that I'm working on out of this batch of wood. So you can see I get plenty of fire starter wood there, plenty of kindling out of trimming the live edge off all these boards. So this here is a piece for the top of the doors. It's a trim to just kind of hide the track and stuff on the sliding closet doors. And same thing, I set up the router table, and just so nice having a decent router table. I set that up to put some radiuses on the corner of it, and then time to just go back and swap out the bit. And having all these MLCS bits to that nice set that I got has really been great. I can just grab whatever I want, and I always seem to have the right bit now. And it's real easy to change them and get everything reset up. So I can put those couple of V's in there to make it match the trim around the mirror that I already made. So I got that. I got this piece of trim just about done now. And as I said, it's it's real nice having a router table that catches all the dust and does a really good job. Then to mount this trim over the doors, I had to make a spacer to go up against the track to keep it nice and even and allow me to screw it to from the back. So I just glued a little strip on there and, some brad nails to actually help hold it till the glue dries. And that was just a couple of minute job. And actually, I did get a air hose reel for my air hose, and here's some English muffins my wife tried making first time, and if anybody's interested, I'll make a video about it. Just let me know. But I did pick up that air hose reel from Northern Tool, and it was like $26 I think, and it really did a good job of getting my hose off the ground. And there's all the top door trim and the moldings. Now, I had one molding I had to piece together because I had a bad spot I had to cut out of it. So the one long piece does have a seam in it there, but you don't really see it. And I went back and I did, sanded everything with 320 grit, and went back with steel wool and Johnson's paste wax on everything to clean that up. And in the end, this is all the molding I had left, so you can see I had no extra for mistakes, so I was lucky everything came out good. Then I put the closet doors in place, and I'm just going back with a 1/2-inch spacer there to scribe them, put some tape on the bottom, and took a Sharpie to mark them so I can cut these down to length. Because that flooring took up a little bit. But when you look at the bottom of them, they screwed them up. They already cut them off too much. So they're up into the hollow section. You can see where it looks like they messed up the height of the closet door opening when they framed it. And they wound up chopping the doors too much. So I tell you what, this builder is supposed to be one of the best builders in the area. I just would hate to see the other houses built by the other guys. But anyhow, I took that straight edge. That was one of those $8 straight edges of clamps I got from Harbor Freight, and that really does work good for stuff like this. Clamp's good, and it's got rubber on it, doesn't slip, and allows you to get a nice straight line, nice straight cut. And here you can see the first door. It's pretty much one side's all hollow. You can see the cardboard there, and the other side's all hollow. So I decided to make some spacers to put in there. I cut a couple blocks for this one, and I just put them on the two hollow corners because I don't want that little guide that rubs against the door to be able to break that off there if somebody pushes on it. So I just made some little pieces of pine to fit up in there, and just gonna glue them in on both sides of that cardboard on this one. And I figured that the cardboard actually would be strong enough to hold it without doing a lot of, I was going to cut that out at first, but then I said, nah, I'll just leave it because it really did seem rigid and strong. So I got these corner pieces all, flushed in there and stuff, and used some of those spring clamps to hold them in place, and got that all filled in on the two edges, you can see. Then I went back and put several coats of polyurethane on that cardboard that actually really stiffened it up good, and it feels almost like it's solid plastic now, so that should hold. So that was the first door. It was one of those 2-minute jobs that turned into a half-hour job, and then I knew the same thing was going to happen on the second one, so same thing. I got the guide clamped on there, just measure back 5 1/16 inch from the mark, and that seems to work good with this DeWalt saw. And then I've just got a fine tooth blade on there to get a nice smooth cut, and the tape actually helps keep it from ripping out too. And I'm just trimming down the second door here. And this one you can see is now hollow all the way across. So just amazing how they make these doors. Just all cardboard. A little bit of wood around the edge. And I made up some more wood for that. And you can see the marks that grizzly planer leaves when you try to plane a piece of softwood down a little bit. So I'm just going to do the same thing. Put some of that tight bond glue on there. I cleaned everything out good first. Little bit of tight bond glue, and this one there was a piece of the pine trim that had come out of the room that I cut down, so it looks about the same color, and a couple spring clamps on there, and let the glue dry up, and just sand it, and go back, put a little polyurethane on it, and that's all done. So now it's time to install the moldings, and you can see I had them all cut to size previously and ready to go, and just wanted to wait until everything was ready to finish up at the end. So I used the 18 gauge brad nailer with some 2-inch brads in it there, and they actually held really good in the cherry, and leave just a really tiny little mark on the where it's set. And then I use these they're like a wax crayon. They come in all different colors and stuff, and I bought these things. Geez, I got all the different colors, and I've got them by different brands and stuff, and I bought them probably 30, 40 years ago, and I just keep using them, and they're still good. Keep them in a plastic bag. So you just scrape some of that in the hole, and then go back with a towel to remove any that got on the surface of it. And it takes a second, and you've got you can't see them anymore. The heads just disappear. And when you're dealing with these hardwood moldings, the only way to really put them in is with a nail gun, because otherwise it's just pain. You got to drill holes, and then try to set them, and you wind up with a bigger hole and stuff. And just using a nail gun puts everyone in perfect, and just leaves you with a little bit of a mess to deal with. You don't have a big hole to fill. And I find that these these 18 gauge brads actually do hold really good when they're put into the studs. So seeing how everything was already previously prepared, and I had glued the outside corners here and stuff like that, everything really did go quick. It only took maybe about 20 minutes to install all the moldings properly, and get all the nail heads filled. And there again, you can see how the little crayons really do make it easy to hide the nails. And the colors, I was lucky to have one that really matched the cherry nice, so that did make it a real quick job. And having everything all set and ready to go just makes it so much less aggravating. Little tight some spots to get in with the gun, but it sure takes a lot less space than a hammer would. And same thing, I'm going over to the other corner, and you can see these walls are just bowed really bad and everything else, and you really have to push it in. And luckily these little brads do hold it good, and they actually pull it in nice and flat. So it's kind of the final step to the room, and everything really starts looking a lot really cleaned up good once you do get the trim around it. And getting around the last couple walls there, and same thing, just push it in and make sure it's up against the wall, and throw a couple brads in it, and everything stays nice. I'm real happy with the pattern for the molding that we picked out and stuff. I thought about going with some wider moldings and stuff, but these actually turned out, I think, to be the best. Then just squeezing in behind the toilet there, and that's basically the last piece, except for one little corner piece on the end. But really, finally I'm getting near the end of the room now, and there's that last piece, corner piece, and the two little spacers that go under the door there. So basically, after this, I just really have a cabinet to build over the toilet there, and a frame to build around the mirror. And there's what they look like. They just call them putty sticks, and it's kind of like made out of a colored wax, and they do work good, and they last a long time. And then I've got one of these Samsung SmartThings sensors that I'm actually putting on the doors. You can see how when it closes, when I open any of the closet doors, it's going to turn on the light in the closet and that light over the outside of the closet there. So the doors, now that you're cut down and all the right sides, they go right back in. You just have to tilt them a little bit and rock them into the tracks. So there's the first one, and the other one just goes right out in front of it. I couldn't believe how those doors were hollow on the bottom, though. And then that trim that I made to go over the doors just goes in there up against the track, and I used a couple of the Craig screws to actually lock it in place there. And that hides all the the track and stuff, so you don't see it later. And it can be removed to remove the doors really easily. A couple screws up from the bottom there. And then the bottom of the doors, you need a glide between them. So I just took a level on the outer door, and I just had to locate the center of them, the glide where it goes, and mark that. Once I got the door level, I can mark the location of the hole in the floor, and drill a pilot hole for the screw. And then that first thing you gotta do is mount the centerpiece there. Now I was looking for a chrome one, or a nicer one, but this is all I could find was a flesh colored plastic one, so I guess that's what I gotta deal with for now. And I did the screws that came with it were too short, so I did have to get some longer screws. And here I'm gonna bore you with watching me screw a 2-inch screw all the way into the floor there. That takes about 2 minutes to do. I was too lazy to go down and get the drill driver. So once you get that located, the outside one and the inside one go in, and I just left about a 1/16 of an inch clearance in there, just so the door would slide without binding or anything, and just had to locate and drill the outer two holes to screw down the stops there. And the same thing, I've got those long screws, but this time I'm not going to make you watch me screw them all the way in. And then there's that Smart Thing sensor that I put on the doors, and you can see when the doors are closed, the lights go off. And when either of the doors open, the light actually comes on, so that actually worked good. And kind of in the dark room, but you can see it really does light up the closet nice, having that big LED 4-foot shop light fixture in there. And then this other light out here comes on too, so that's nice for getting a coat out in the dark. I just wanted to show you that I did make a little more progress on this on these cold, snowy days outside. I've been working in my shop, moving things around, and working on all this trim here and stuff. And basically this room is done now, except for a cabinet to go over the toilet there, and a quick frame to go around the actual mirror on the other side of the wall there. But overall, we're real happy the way it's come out so far, and I just thought I'd share this update with you. And it's definitely been a crazy, snowy, cold, rainy spring this year, and I'm hoping to get back out in the garden soon and finish some of that up. Hopefully everyone's staying safe with all these COVID-19 lockdowns. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.